Welcome to the Original Self Podcast. I'm Yvette DeCota, owner of DeCota Life Coaching and a psychology-informed life coach exploring resilience, mindset, and the courage to become your authentic self. This is a space for honest conversations about growth, identity, relationships, and all the messy moments in between that shape who we become. Between the salon chair and coaching sessions, I've watched people move through life in patterns they rarely notice. Patterns that are subtle, familiar, and incredibly hard to see from the inside. Today's episode is about something I hear constantly from clients and honestly from myself. Most of us have been told the same story about food. If you can't stop eating, you lack discipline. If you gain weight, you don't have enough willpower. If you keep reaching for the same foods over and over again, the problem has to be you. Today, I want to challenge that story. This is episode 16, The Engineered Plate, how hyper-palatable foods are designed to defeat you. Welcome back. Last time I introduced you to a series I've been building for a while, one that uses the lens of psychology to examine something we all do every single day, yet we rarely understand as deeply as we think we do. I told you in the introduction to Before the Rules, a Psychology of Food series, episode 15, that this series isn't really about food. It's about how we lose ourselves around it and how we find our way back. And as I promised, we'd start there with the self-blame that follows so many of us into the kitchen every single day. So let's start with the collective you. Think about the last time you told yourself, I'm just going to have a few Doritos. Or I'm just going to eat one brown butter chocolate chip cookie with salt, sea salt. Or that you'd stop eating the popcorn that you made after this next episode of the TV show that you've been binging. And then you won't eat anything else for the rest of the night. But you didn't stop. And somewhere in the aftermath, maybe in the moment of sitting with that empty bag or on a drive home and you go to the drive-thru that you hadn't planned to stop at. There's a feeling that you get. It's not just fullness. It's something uncomfortable, like a specific kind of self-blame that so many of us know intimately, and maybe we've never named it before. Never named it out loud. Most people interpret that feeling as evidence of a personal failing. I'm weak. I have no discipline. Or other people seem to manage this just fine. So what's wrong with me? That story's so familiar. It's so deeply embedded in the way we talk about our bodies or eating and how we speak about self-control. It rarely gets questioned. We just accept it as the truth, carry the weight, the shame, and the defeat of it everywhere we go. But here's the question I asked myself maybe 6 years ago that changed the entire direction of my motivation, goals, and honestly, the way I understand myself. What if the problem isn't that you're broken? What if it's the environment working exactly as intended and you were never supposed to be able to easily resist the foods that harm you? Because here's what I've come to understand through the years of psychology study, through my own research, and through watching clients, friends, and obviously myself navigate this. Willpower is real, but not infinite. It was never designed to compete alone against a system that's built with billions of dollars and decades of neuroscience specifically designed to override it. To understand where we are today, it helps to understand how we got here. There was a moment in American history, from astronauts in space eating and drinking powdered foods, through the 60s and 70s explosion of TV dinners and canned everything, to the 80s invention of the microwave, and when the relationship between humans and what they ate began to shift fundamentally. Before that, most people ate what they grew, what was prepared, and what was available to them. The food was simpler, the flavors were very straightforward, and your body's natural signals of hunger, fullness, and satisfaction largely guided your food experience. But then food became an industry, and industries compete. They compete for shelf space, market share, your attention, and your loyalty. And the industry that wins the competition is the one that receives the most of your repeated purchases. But those winners, they don't win by accident. They won by science. A psychophysicist, Howard Moskowitz, discovered it first by testing something deceptively simple. He tested at what point does sweetness stop being pleasurable? How much sugar is too much before enjoyment starts to fall away? He called that peak, where something is enjoyed the most, the bliss point. And his findings changed the food industry forever. He found that pleasure follows a curve. As sugar increases, enjoyment rises, but only up to a point. Then it drops. And once the food industry understood that a bliss point could be engineered, not just for sugar, but for the precise combination of salt, sugar, and fat simultaneously, everything changed. Brands like Prego and Pepsi and Dr. Pepper used multivariate analysis to maximize their products' appeal to consumers, turning them into dominant forces on supermarket shelves. That R&D, that scientific experiment, is what birthed the hyper-palatable or ultra-processed food industry as we know it today. What followed that was an arms race of palatability. Companies began spending enormous resources, not to just make food taste good, but to make it taste in a way the brain couldn't easily walk away from. Understanding the why requires just a brief detour into neuroscience, so I can show you how any willpower fight we think we can muster completely falls apart. Don't worry, it's not nerdy science stuff. So this is how the brain and hunger and food work together. The brain regulates eating in two ways. The homeostatic pathway, which determines the body's energy need, and when we run low, a hunger signal is sent out to tell us that we're hungry. And it's also the system that tells us when we're full. It is practical and functional when it's not been messed with. The other system is the hedonic pathway, or the reward system. It operates on pleasure, motivation, but not nutritional need. It has no concern for whether your body needs more fuel. Its only focus is on what feels good, what tastes good, what smells good. Usually these two systems exist in harmony. But hyper-palatable food, engineered to hit that bliss point, activates the hedonic pathways so strongly that they override the homeostatic ones over and over. So even when your body knows it's had enough, your reward system has yet to reach satisfaction. And so you keep eating those chips, that cookie. The biology of the brain was built for a world that we actually no longer live in. Then there's dopamine. It's often called the feel-good chemical, but I believe that phrase undersells what it actually does. Dopamine is less about pleasure and more about anticipation, the wanting. Research from Harvard's nutrition department has shown that the expectation of a reward stimulates more dopamine activity than the reward itself. And the crazy part is that if the reward exceeds the dopamine response, even if it's larger than expected, our motivation for the reward drives us to seek the experience again. Think about the smell of something cooking in your favorite restaurant as you walk past, or the crinkle of a bag of your favorite snack in someone else's hands, or even the image of a particular food. They all trigger dopamine before you take a single bite. That is ancient neurology responding to signals that it's never resisted. One of the most elegant biological mechanisms we have is called sensory-specific satiety. It's very easily exploited by industries selling the drug of hyper-palatable foods. The way it works is that as you eat a particular food, the pleasure you get from that specific flavor gradually declines. Your brain gets bored with it. Its satisfaction drops, and the drive to continue eating fades until you stop. But when a product is engineered to contain multiple distinct flavor compounds, like fat hitting one receptor, salt another, or sugar hitting more receptors, and then there's layered artificial enhancers throughout, the sensory-specific satiety cannot perform. Before one element reaches its satisfaction point, the next one is just pulling you forward. So the finish line keeps moving. Companies like McDonald's completely know that. McDonald's puts added sugar in far more products than most people realize, including their hamburger buns, their sauces, even their salads. A quarter pounder with cheese isn't an accident. It's a scientifically calibrated combination of fat, salt, and sugar designed to light up your hedonic pathways, bypass the signals that would normally tell you to stop eating, and flood the brain with enough dopamine that the craving reactivates the next time you see those golden arches or a commercial. You're not weak. You've just been very studied by companies that will stop at nothing to make that almighty dollar. So about 6 years ago, I found myself in a pattern I couldn't quite explain. After work or on weekends, sometimes, a lot of times, when I wasn't particularly hungry, I was pulling into McDonald's. Not because I decided to. Not because I was even craving something specifically. I would come back to awareness that I was there, already in the drive-through line. Like, I didn't black out. It was just so unconscious. It was like some part of my brain had decided, before I was even consulted, like a mind control experiment, that I was going. Once I learned how these foods are engineered, the more I understood how powerless I really was against them. One of the questions that launched my academic research was, why do intelligent, disciplined, accomplished people struggle so much around food? Not people who are uninformed or careless, but people who have built careers, raised families, navigated genuine complexity in their lives. Yet they still find themselves feeling completely powerless in front of a bag of something that they didn't intend to eat. Some of it comes down to awareness. Many of us move through our days on autopilot, eating without ever stopping to ask what's actually driving this. But even for the people who are paying attention, the struggle is real. That's where Roy Baumeister's research on self-control became very intriguing to me. Baumeister found that self-regulation functions like a muscle. It can be used and it can be depleted. Every act of self-control draws from the same limited pool of mental energy. Whether you're managing an emotion or pushing through a difficult task or simply resisting the cookies someone left in the break room. And by the way, those cookies are a daily occurrence in the salon break room, and I have a very big love-hate relationship with them. But Baumeister ran an experiment where participants who had spent energy-resisting chocolate chip cookies gave up on doing a difficult puzzle 8 minutes into doing it, compared to other participants that didn't resist a cookie, wasn't even having a cookie in front of them. They stayed in doing that puzzle for 19 minutes. They weren't more capable. They just hadn't used their self-regulatory resources yet. The reason I'm telling you about this research is that if you think about yourself by 10 o'clock at night, after a full day of decisions, demands, emotional management, you are not the same person who set intentions in the morning. Your prefrontal cortex, which is in charge of planning, exercising self-control, and also engages in long-term thinking, is running on less. And that's precisely why you find yourself tiredly standing in the middle of your kitchen or pressing buy on the food app, grabbing the engineered food without a second thought. As part of my psychology research at Dominican University of California, I studied the relationship between stress, impulsivity, and hyper-palatable food consumption. What I expected to find, and what I did find, was that stress increases hyper-palatable food consumption. But the finding that surprised me most was that consumption rates in stressful scenarios and non-stressful scenarios were nearly identical. People weren't just reaching for these foods because they were stressed. They were reaching for them because of fatigue, boredom, habit, and it often occurred in the evening. The food themselves had become maybe the path of least resistance, regardless of emotional state. And impulsivity, not stress, turned out to be the stronger independent predictor of how much someone consumed. That made me think of when I was growing up, we had what we called the junk drawer. It was filled with cookies, candies, chips, all the food that we know now as hyper-palatable. We weren't allowed to eat from it whenever we wanted, but it was always there. Sometimes we'd ask if we could have something, and sometimes, if you're me, you'd sneak it. Looking back, what's interesting isn't that the food was there. It's that nobody thought twice about it. It was normal. Nobody was trying to harm us. Nobody was having conversations about food manipulation, dopamine, or ultra-processed foods. It was just food, at least as far as I understood it. I think that's an important point because most of us inherited our relationship with eating before we were even old enough to understand what we were inheriting. The food was normal. The habits were normal. The constant presence of highly rewarding snacks was normal. I didn't choose that environment. Many of us didn't choose that. We grew up inside it. And when something's always been normal, it's incredibly difficult to recognize how much influence it's still having on you decades later. It is for me. This matters enormously for how we think about self-blame. Intelligence doesn't protect you from the hedonic pathways. Success doesn't exempt you from decision fatigue. Discipline is a resource, and resources run out. When your capacity for resistance is low and your environment is deliberately constructed to exploit that exact moment, the outcome isn't a character flaw. It's math. We tend to talk about the consequences of hyperpalatable foods almost exclusively in terms of weight. But the physical health implications are real and documented. The research connecting ultra-processed food consumption to heart disease, type 2 diabetes, metabolic disorders like high blood pressure is substantial. But another cost is the mental overhead. It's that constant low-level negotiation that happens around eating when you've lost trust in your own responses. Am I actually hungry, or am I just bored? Am I eating because I want this or because I can't stop? Why can I be disciplined in every other area of my life, but not with food? I have thought these thoughts so many times in my life that I've lost count. I smoked cigarettes for 13 years, at least a pack a day. And I was able to quit smoking. I've never had another cigarette for over 25 years. Not once have I taken a drag or even thought about smoking again. Why was I able to conquer that compulsion, yet I've struggled with food cravings and food noise almost my entire life? I think the answer is more simple than I actually want it to be. I don't need cigarettes to stay alive. I can walk away from them completely and never look back. But I can't abstain from eating. Nobody can. And when the thing you're trying to navigate is also the thing your body requires to survive, willpower becomes almost an impossible standard to hold yourself to. I've done it at times for a few weeks, even a few years, but I always revert. Add that to the lifetime of processed foods that rewired the signals my natural biology was supposed to rely on, and a very likely addiction to sugar that started way before I was old enough to question what I was eating. And the deck was never stacked in my favor. And that internal tug of war never really goes away. It shows up as intrusive thoughts about food that occupy real cognitive space. The shame that accumulates quietly and then surfaces in the least expected moments. In a dressing room, looking at a photo of yourself, or in a conversation you weren't expecting to have, knocks us off balance. The fundamental disconnection from your own body is the real injury lying underneath these questions. When your body overrides signals enough times because the food you eat is specifically designed to do so, you're unable to hear those signs clearly. It makes you stop trusting hunger or fullness. You begin to experience your own biology as the enemy rather than information. The difficulty of spending years at war with your body makes the idea of listening to it feel truly unnerving. It creates a distrust of self because you can change what you eat in a week, but rebuilding a relationship with your own body takes considerably longer. I know it starts with understanding what happened to create the distance in the first place. If you're feeling angry, annoyed, or disappointed at the companies that sell hyper-palatable foods, I completely understand that feeling. But it's not my intent for this episode. It's not going to end with me speaking about a new plan that will be a miracle, or a list of foods to avoid, or a protocol to follow. I'm interested in the meaningful difference between making a choice and having a choice made for you, for us. Because most of us move through our relationships with food without ever clearly seeing which of those is happening. We experience a craving and interpret it as desire, without even knowing that the craving was activated by dopamine responding to engineered anticipation. We eat past fullness and call it weakness, without knowing that the sensory-specific satiety was circumvented by design. We resist all day and collapse at night and decide we don't have any willpower, without knowing that willpower is a finite resource that was steadily drawn down by everything else the day asked of us. It's also worth noting that this conversation is beginning to move beyond individual responsibility and into public policy. Researchers, physicians, and policymakers are increasingly asking whether it makes sense to place the entire burden on consumers when so much of the modern food environment has been deliberately engineered to drive consumption. They're raising questions about food labeling, advertising directed at children, the availability of ultra-processed foods in schools, and also whether consumers are receiving enough information to make an informed decision about what they're eating. Countries that are not America have already induced warning labels and restrictions on certain forms of marketing. More countries are debating whether highly processed foods should be regulated more like products that carry known health risks, like tobacco and alcohol. Regardless of where those conversations ultimately lead, the fact that they're happening at all represents a huge shift. For decades, the dominant message was simple. If you're struggling, the problem's you. But when governments and researchers and public health organizations begin asking questions about the environment itself, it suggests we're starting to recognize that human behavior doesn't happen in a vacuum. The choices we make are always influenced by the systems we live inside. Understanding the system doesn't excuse us from participating in our lives. It doesn't remove agency. However, it gives us the ability to see more clearly. And when we see clearly, we finally begin to ask the right questions. It's not what's wrong with me, but what is actually happening here? It's not why can't I control myself, but what am I really responding to in this moment? That shift from self-blame to curiosity is where awareness work begins. It may be uncomfortable. I know it is. But curiosity requires slowing down in moments when the pull to just eat on autopilot is very strong. It's honest, and it's the beginning of coming back to yourself. What I'd like to leave you with today is simple. Before you make your next food decision, just this once, pause long enough to notice what's happening. Not to judge it or override it through sheer force of will. just notice. Are you hungry? Are you tired? Is the pull to eat ultra-processed foods coming from inside you or from something in the environment? There's no perfect answer. You just have to become curious enough to look. I know there was a version of you, a version of us before all of this, who knew how to eat. That version that trusted hunger and recognized fullness and didn't spend your cognitive energy negotiating with that box of C's candy, the pint of Cherry Garcia, or that cold slice of pepperoni in the middle of the night. The work of this series isn't to turn you into someone new. It's to help you remember who that person was and to slowly start, without judgment, to find your way back to your original self. In the next episode, we're going deeper into one of the most misunderstood experiences in our relationship with eating: food noise. It's that constant mental chatter about what you should eat, what you shouldn't eat, and what you're going to eat later, and whether any of it makes you a good or bad person. We'll talk about where it comes from, why some people experience it far more intensely than others, and what it actually means when the food noise gets louder. Look for episode 17, Food Noise, Why You Can't Stop Thinking About Food. That's next time on the Original Self podcast. Until then, thank you for being here. If today's conversation resonated with you and you feel ready to explore your own growth, you can learn more about working with me in the episode notes. I'll see you next time.